All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started here. And see if more people just pop on as we go. But this is Jared, if you couldn't tell. And we're going to talk about smart client shortcuts today. And instead of setting up a PowerPoint and going through this, I figure we'll just spend the time getting into the software and showing some of the various shortcuts that are available within the smart client. And I've divided these up into kind of three categories. I don't know what we officially call them, but I've called them self-defined keyboard shortcuts, which are shortcuts where you can map any type of keyboard combination to a whole list of various items within the smart client. And then built-in shortcuts, which are shortcuts that are strictly basically you have no way to alter them or anything like that. It's just kind of just fully built in, and then kind of hybrid where you have to do some configuration on them, but then some aspect of it you have no control over either. So to start it off, we'll talk about the self-defined keyboard shortcuts. So in the smart client, if you go up here at the top right corner, you click this little down arrow, and you go into settings, and you go into keyboard. You have a whole list of categories, and under each category, there's a lot of commands that you can map different key shortcut combinations or keyboard combinations to. So, for an example, I've done some of these already, but I'll just do one to kind of show you how it's done. Let's say I wanted to do restore the application. I come up here in the press shortcut key, and I do whatever combination I want. So I can do a function key, so I can press like F8, and it'll do F8. If I didn't like that one, I can do Control P, for example. You can do combinations too, Control Shift W. You can even use Alt in there as well. So you can use all kinds of combinations. It can also, if you really wanted to, be a single letter, although that could cause complications in other areas. But if I just wanted it to be, nope, they changed that. That's good. Can't be a single letter anymore. Never mind that. But so you can map all these keys. So you do your combination, you hit assign, you create this list down below, and you can see I've got some created here already, and I'll kind of show you how these work. These are just some that are that can be more useful. There's a lot of them in here that aren't necessarily useful, but you can see here I've got one that reloads the server configuration. What this does is if a setting gets changed on the management side, say a new camera gets added, for example. If I'm already logged into the smart client, I won't see that new camera, but I typically have to log out and log back in. But I could also map a shortcut key, which is reload server configuration, which will tell it to go out there and grab an updated configuration without me having to log out and log back in. It'll grab most updated configuration, not everything, but it'll grab most everything. But then there's also shortcut keys just for being able to move around in the software a little quicker. And there's some in here I didn't know existed, like toggle privacy mask. I'll show that one. But so if I want to switch between live and playback, I did like Shift Control L, Shift Control P for live and playback, Shift Control M for privacy mask. So if we go out of here, like we'll do the privacy mask one first. So if I go Shift Control M, you can see my privacy mask on this axis camera disappeared. And then it's a toggle command, so I can hit it again to bring it back. If I want to switch to playback, I did Control Shift P. It moves me over to the playback tab. Control Shift L will put me back into live. I did one that hides this sidebar. So Control Shift H hides my little side pane. And then Control Shift H again brings it back. So it's all kind of key mappings that you can do. You can do mappings for a lot of the playback controls too, like frame forward, frame reverse, different things like that. So instead of having to grab the mouse and go click the buttons, you can map it to a shortcut key, which a lot of users like, because especially if it's a function that they're using a lot, like playback controls and such, being able to do that from the keyboard instead of having to grab the mouse and move the mouse arrow down there all the time, it can be a lot quicker from the keyboard. So from there, we'll move over to what I'll call built-in shortcuts. So it's just shortcuts that, again, you don't have any control over, but they're there. And a lot of these don't seem to necessarily be documented, or at least documented well either. So for example, one is the reload the view shortcut. So if I've come in here, if I'm in live mode or playback mode, and I come in here and I've grabbed a different camera and thrown it over here, if I want to go back to what my original view was, I can grab the mouse and I can click this reload view button up here. But I can also hit / twice and then enter, and it'll do the same thing. So if I go / enter, it reloads my view back to what the saved view is. So again, a quick way to get back to where you were if you've been kind of navigating around and throwing cameras into your view. It's a quick way to load that back again. Another one, which is really handy if you have multiple monitors, is the Alt key, and it works on a single monitor too. So if I press Alt, you'll see the one that appears at the top. What that is it's numbering my displays that have Smart Client on them. So actually, as an example, if we'll do this as a floating window here. I'll just put this over here. So if I press Alt, you can see I've got 1 and I've got 2. So then if I press 2, now it's numbered each of my panes. So maybe I select 7. So now it's selected that pane within that view. So I'll do it again here, but I'll go back to a kind of simple mode here. So I press Alt, I select what display I want, and then I select which camera. And now that becomes my selected camera. So again, it's a quick way to move around, especially on multiple displays if you're not wanting to grab the mouse all the time. And then from there, another one that piggybacks off of this is once I have any camera selected, I can use the arrow keys on the number pad on the keyboard. This doesn't work on just the normal arrow keys. It's got to be the arrow keys on the number pad, which is 8 is up, 2 is down, 4 is left, and 6 is right. But I can use that if you see the blue square moving around here in the view, I can use that to navigate around in my view. And then I can do stuff like if I want that camera and I press enter, no, that's not going to work. Never mind that. But it allows me to move around here. I could map a shortcut key to maximize that camera. Enter used to do it. Apparently it doesn't. But it's, again, another keyboard-driven way to move around. And then the last one's kind of a built-in one. Has to do with the timeline. So on the timeline in the playback tab, you have the data down here, and I can see here in this slider bar in the lower right, it says 2 hours. So right now I'm seeing 2 hours left to right on my timeline. That's kind of the amount of data it's showing at one point in time. I can use the slider bar to adjust that. So I can go to 4 hours, 12 hours, anything like that. But the shortcut keys, I can also hold down the control key on the keyboard and use the mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out on the timeline here. So I can quickly go all the way in, all the way out on here. The really nice benefit of it, because on playback, you do have the slider bar, but that shortcut key works anywhere that there's a playback or a timeline bar. And most of the other places don't have the actual slider bar. So like here on independent playback, when you go into independent playback by default, you're only seeing a minute of time on the timeline. But I can use that control and scroll wheel, and again, zoom in and out as much as I want to here. You can do things like right click and go to zoom, but again, that takes a lot longer. So anywhere that there is a timeline, like even if I go into here, grab a chunk of time real quick, and we go into our export window. Even in our export window, I can zoom in and zoom out on that timeline just by using the control button and the scroll wheel. It works on the alarm manager tab everywhere. So it's a nice little shortcut to be able to zoom in and out on the video and get a better idea of what you're looking at video wise. And then the last ones we'll talk about here are camera shortcuts and view shortcuts. So camera shortcuts, these kind of fall into the hybrid category, I'd call them. So for camera shortcuts, you have to go in the management client first. And you go to your cameras. I'll just go ahead and select the camera. I've already set some of these up. But if you go to the camera and you go to the client tab, there's this shortcut field right here. So it's just asking for a number. So you can number your cameras here, however you want to number them, however it makes sense. And then in the smart client, you'll see here I have some of these set up. You can see these top 4 axis cameras are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then these Canon cameras are numbered 5 and 6. So now they've got shortcuts. So now I can use a keyboard shortcut to call those those cameras. So if I'm, for example, whatever base is going to call it into whatever pane I have selected. And so this is where also using the arrow keys to move around, or the Alt, 1, 2, or whatever you want to do to move around can help, because now I can call these cameras in there too. And the way you call the cameras is / the camera number and then enter. So I'm on this top left camera right now. I'm going to call camera 6, which is this Canon VB S900F. So I'm just going to hit / 6 enter, and it pulls that camera into the view. Then I could move over to this next one if I wanted to and say / 5 enter and pull the other Canon camera, number 5, in there. And then if I wanted to go back to what I already had, like I talked about recently, double / and then enter, and it'll reload my view back to where it is. So that was kind of a hybrid one. You got to set up the number, but the command to actually call the camera is always the same, always / camera number enter. And then there's a similar one, which is for views, which you set up in the smart client. So if I go into setup here and you select the view, you can see this shortcut box down here. You just type in the number and hit set, and you can tell which number your views are. So I've got 1 and 2 numbered right now. And so this one, the way it gets called is instead of / it's the star. So star view number enter. So if I go *2 enter, it calls my hotspot view. If I go *1 enter, it calls my quad view. A lot of this goes back to kind of the camera and view shortcuts, goes back to the analog world and how that was done. Because with the matrix switchers and stuff and large systems, the operators would get so used to what the camera shortcuts were, they would just over time start memorizing what they are, at least the common ones, and that's how you call them up. Instead of having to look at a list or something like that, you just type in the camera number and or the monitor number and call the camera there. So these kind of relate back to that. It's kind of not something that all users would use, but there's definitely a benefit to it if you want to not have to be sitting there digging through a list. And if you know kind of these common cameras you use or common views you use, it's a quick way to be able to pull those up. That's all I got, unless anyone on here knows of any other, especially built-in shortcuts. So Uwe said holding control and dragging the timeline also switches it to a more fine-tuned scroll. Okay. Yep. So Uwe was saying if you hold down control, so if I'm not holding control, I can drag the timeline really quickly. If I hold down control and drag it, it's a little bit slower. That's kind of cool. It's similar to if you just use the scroll wheel without holding control on the timeline, you can kind of scroll around too. So kind of a similar effect, although it looks like it's even slower. That's cool. That's one I didn't know. All right. Well, then that's all we have for today. Thank you everyone for attending, and catch us next week for the next FMFF.